A tense hush fell over the Riverview, Manhattan's crown jewel of fine dining. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across polished silverware, while the gentle notes of a piano melody floated through the air. Yet beneath this veneer of luxury, Alexander Mitchell felt his heart hammering against his ribs. The restaurant's newest server had just been assigned the center table, the one occupied by Maxwell Harrison. Alex straightened his black tie, feeling the weight of the CEO rainbow pin on his lapel. At 26, he carried himself with quiet dignity, though his eyes held the weariness of someone who had sacrificed much. Once a brilliant medical student at Columbia, Alex had been forced to abandon his white coat when his younger brother's rare immune disorder required expensive treatments their parents' insurance wouldn't cover. "Table 7 needs you," James Sullivan, the restaurant manager, whispered. His expression carried a warning. "It's Harrison. Be careful." Everyone knew Maxwell Harrison, hotel magnate, real estate tycoon, a man whose fortune was matched only by his reputation for cruelty. His presence commanded attention, his crisp suit and steel-gray eyes projecting power with every calculated movement. What few knew was the bitterness that fueled him, a past betrayal by a former partner who had stolen both his heart and his first business concept, leaving wounds that had never truly healed. As Alex approached the table, he noticed Catherine Lawrence dining nearby. The influential magazine editor was known for her sharp observations and social justice advocacy. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken current of recognition passing between them. "Good evening, gentlemen," Alex greeted Harrison's table professionally. "Welcome to the Riverview." Harrison's gaze flickered to Alex's rainbow pin, then to his name tag. Something cold and calculating settled in his expression, the look of a predator who had just spotted prey. The night ahead would test more than Alex's serving skills. It would challenge everything he believed about dignity, courage, and the price of silence. In a world where power is measured in dollars, sometimes the strongest currency is the courage to stand tall when others demand you bow. If this story has already touched something in you, there's much more ahead. Subscribe to Heart Stories, where every moment of courage becomes a light for others to follow. Maxwell Harrison was not dining alone. Across from him sat Richard Dawson, a conservative hotel developer from Texas whose investments Harrison desperately needed. Between them lay an unspoken agreement. Impress Dawson, secure the deal. And Harrison knew exactly what would impress a man like Dawson. "Tell me about your specials," Harrison demanded, his voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby tables. When Alex began his practiced description of the chef's offerings, Harrison's eyes never left the rainbow pin. His lips curled into a smirk. "I'll have the ribeye," Harrison interrupted, deliberately knocking his water glass with his elbow. Cold liquid splashed across the pristine tablecloth and onto Alex's pressed black pants. "Clumsy service here, isn't it, Richard?" Dawson chuckled on cue. Several diners glanced up, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with the morbid curiosity of those witnessing a car crash. Catherine Lawrence's fingers discreetly moved to her phone, recording the scene. Alex felt heat rise to his face, the familiar burn of humiliation he thought he'd left behind in high school hallways. But instead of reacting, he took a steadying breath, remembering Dr. Barry Whitman's words during his emergency room rotation. "In crisis, find your center. The patient needs your calm, not your panic." "I apologize, sir," Alex replied, his voice steady as he dabbed at the spill with a napkin. "I'll bring fresh water immediately." James Sullivan watched from near the kitchen, torn between intervening and preserving Harrison's business. The tycoon was not just a customer, but a potential investor in their planned second location. James's hand tightened around a menu, indecision written across his face. As Alex retreated to retrieve clean linens, he caught sight of his reflection in the polished surface of the kitchen door. The face looking back at him was the same one that had promised his brother Tommy. "I'll never let anyone make you feel small for who you are or who you love." Yet here he was, swallowing insults to keep a job that barely covered Tommy's treatments. The kitchen bustled with activity, chefs calling orders while line cooks moved with practiced precision. Alex grabbed fresh linens, his hands slightly trembling. Maria, a fellow server, touched his arm gently. "Harrison again?" she asked, understanding in her eyes. When Alex nodded, she sighed. "That man has made 3 servers quit this month alone. Just keep your head down and get through it." That was the problem. Alex thought too many people kept their heads down, allowing cruelty to thrive in silence. But with Tommy's medical bills mounting and no other immediate job prospects, what choice did he have in the soft light of the restaurant? The waters of dignity and survival were becoming increasingly murky. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists or words, but with the quiet resolve to maintain your humanity when others are determined to strip it away. When Alex returned with the main course, Harrison was mid-anecdote, his voice carrying through the restaurant like the toll of a warning bell. "That's the problem with service these days," he proclaimed as Alex carefully placed the perfectly seared ribeye before him. "No attention to detail, no respect for tradition." The piano melody that had filled the restaurant faded to silence between songs. In that moment, all that remained was the soft clink of silverware and the weight of dozens of watching eyes. Alex felt each stare like a physical touch against his skin. "Perhaps if you spent less time with your lifestyle choices," Harrison continued, gesturing dismissively toward Alex's rainbow pin, "and more time focusing on proper service, you wouldn't be so painfully slow." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Around them, conversations halted. A woman at a nearby table lowered her wine glass, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval directed not at Alex, but at Harrison. Yet, like the others, she remained silent, unwilling to disrupt the delicate social contract of the upscale establishment. Catherine Lawrence's expression hardened as she continued recording, her journalist's instinct recognizing the unfolding story beneath the surface interaction. Her fingers moved deftly across her phone screen, ensuring every moment was captured. As Alex stood there, time seemed to slow. His mind flashed back to the hospital hallway where he'd found Tommy huddled against a prone, tears streaming down his face after classmates had taunted him about having the gay brother. That night, sitting on Tommy's bed, Alex had told him, "Their words only have the power we give them. True respect isn't taken through fear, it's earned through how we treat others." The memory strengthened something in Alex's spine. James Sullivan had moved closer now, hovering at the edge of the confrontation, his loyalties visibly divided between protecting his staff and placating a wealthy patron. "I assure you, sir, I'm providing the best service I can," Alex said quietly, his voice carrying in the hushed room. His eyes, for the first time, met Harrison's directly, not in challenge, but with the steady gaze of someone who had faced far worse fears than the disapproval of a bitter man. Richard Dawson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing around at the other diners who had become unwilling spectators to Harrison's performance. The tension in the air was palpable, like the moment before a storm breaks. In that moment, something shifted in the atmosphere. It was subtle, a collective intake of breath, the silent recognition that sometimes dignity speaks louder than wealth ever could. For many watching, it was the first time they'd witnessed someone standing firm against the customary deference wealth commanded. The true currency of respect, it seemed, wasn't stored in bank accounts, but in the courage to remain whole when others demand pieces of your soul. Maxwell Harrison's knife clattered against fine china as he slammed his fist on the table. Wine glasses trembled, sending crimson ripples across their surfaces. The violent gesture silenced every corner of the Riverview. "You will show me respect," Harrison demanded, his voice stripped of its earlier veneer of civility. The mask had fallen away, revealing the raw insecurity beneath his practiced arrogance. Alex stood motionless, feeling the weight of his choices pressing down. In his peripheral vision, he could see James Sullivan moving toward them, Catherine Lawrence's unwavering gaze, and dozens of diners frozen in uncomfortable witness. This was the moment where paths diverged, continue in safe silence, or speak a truth that might cost him everything. In his mind, Alex saw Tommy in his hospital bed, brave despite the IV lines and uncertainty. He thought of his former medical professors who had praised his potential. and of the countless patients he still hoped to help someday. What example would he set for them if he bowed now, drawing himself to his full height? Alex spoke with quiet certainty. Respect isn't demanded by shouting. Mr. Harrison, it's earned. The words carried through the silent restaurant, not because they were loud, but because they were true. I've respected you by doing my job professionally. Perhaps you might consider doing the same. Harrison's face flushed crimson, his mouth opening to deliver another barb when a voice interrupted from his own party. Uncle Max, Daniel Harrison said softly. Everyone is watching. For the first time, Maxwell Harrison looked around the restaurant, seeing not the admiration he expected, but thinly veiled disgust. Even Richard Dawson shifted uncomfortably, suddenly less impressed by the display. The moment hung suspended, a perfect balance between what had been and what could be. Then Daniel's eyes met Alex's, and something passed between them an understanding, perhaps, or recognition. The younger Harrison's hand moved briefly to touch a spot on his chest, as though reaching for a pin he did not wear. Maxwell Harrison caught the gesture, comprehension dawning slowly on his face as he looked between his nephew and Alex. In the polished silver serving dish on their table, Harrison caught his own reflection, contorted with anger, isolated in his privilege, a perfect mirror of the men who had once made him feel powerless before he built his empire as armor. The restaurant seemed to hold its collective breath. A couple at a nearby table exchanged knowing glances. An elderly woman dabbed at the corner of her eye with a linen napkin. A young busboy paused mid-task, watching with undisguised admiration as Alex remained standing, neither confrontational nor submissive, simply present in his truth. James Sullivan had reached the table now, poised to intervene, but something in the tableau before him made him hesitate. This wasn't merely a dispute between customer and server anymore. It had transformed into something more profound, a moment of reckoning that everyone present would remember long after the taste of the evening's cuisine had faded. The silence stretched thin, waiting for resolution. For many watching, it was the first time they'd seen vulnerability crack the facade of wealth. The true measure of power, it seemed, wasn't in how loudly one could demand obedience, but in whether one was worthy of the respect freely given by others. Some lessons arrived too late in life, delivered by the most unexpected teachers. The tension snapped when Maxwell Harrison stood abruptly, throwing his napkin onto the table. Without another word, he strode toward the exit, leaving behind a thick envelope of cash. Daniel Harrison lingered, his expression a complex mixture of shame and relief. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Alex before following his uncle. The words were simple but carried the weight of shared understanding. As the restaurant door closed behind the Harrisons, a single pair of hands began to applaud. Catherine Lawrence stood, her elegant fingers creating a rhythm soon joined by other diners until the sound swelled throughout the Riverview. Not thunderous, but steady and affirming. James Sullivan approached Alex, placing a hand on his shoulder. "In 10 years of restaurant management," he said, "I've never seen someone handle that with such dignity." His eyes conveyed what his words couldn't, that some principles matter more than profit margins. The following week transformed Alex's life in ways he never imagined. Catherine's article, "Dignity Served How One Waiter Stood Up to Billion-Dollar Bullying," went viral. Job offers flooded in. But the most surprising envelope arrived at his apartment on Thursday morning, a check covering Tommy's full treatment plan and a letter signed by Maxwell Harrison. "Your words made me see a reflection I've been avoiding." The letter read, "My nephew Daniel has helped me understand how much damage silence can cause. The enclosed is not charity, it's recognition of a debt long owed to those I've hurt. Our hotel group is launching a new diversity initiative, and we would value your input when you have time." The letter trembled in Alex's hands as he read it twice, then a third time, hardly believing the words before him. Tommy, peering over his shoulder, whistled softly. "So the dragon had a heart after all," he murmured, his voice stronger now that his treatments were progressing. 2 weeks later, Alex received a call from Catherine Lawrence. Her magazine was establishing a scholarship fund for LGBTQ plus students pursuing medical careers, inspired by his story. "We want you to be the first recipient," she explained. "Your education shouldn't be sacrificed because of your brother's health or society's prejudices." 3 months later, Alex stood in his white coat once again, having returned to medical school with the scholarship's support. In the audience of his white coat ceremony sat Tommy, healthy and beaming, alongside Catherine and, surprisingly, Daniel Harrison, now openly wearing the rainbow pin his uncle had once scorned. After the ceremony, Daniel approached Alex with nervous energy. "Uncle Max wanted to come," he said, "but thought his presence might overshadow your moment. He's trying. It's not perfect, but it's a start." The Riverview incident had rippled outward in unexpected ways. Several restaurant chains had revised their training protocols to address discrimination. Maxwell Harrison's hotel group had implemented comprehensive sensitivity training and established an LGBTQ+ employee resource group. Small changes, perhaps, in the grand scheme of things, but meaningful to those affected. Life rarely offers perfect resolutions, but sometimes it provides perfect moments of growth. Maxwell Harrison would never become a champion of equality overnight, but he had taken his first steps away from the bitterness that had defined him. And Alex had discovered that standing tall, even for a moment, could create ripples that changed many lives beyond his own. What would you risk to maintain your dignity when faced with power and prejudice? How might one moment of courage transform not just your life, but the lives of those watching in silence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to subscribe to Heart Stories, where every tale reminds us that the true measure of character isn't found in how we treat those above us, but in how we recognize the humanity in everyone we meet.